quilting tale today. My name is Shaylin, and this is part 2 of my Sparrows quilt that I'm making, just sharing some tips for making this quilt. This was a viewer's choice. I had asked earlier in January for viewers to select which quilt they'd like to see me make, and so Sparrows was the most popular of the 3 options. And this is a pattern by Pen and Paper Patterns, and I've already done a video. If you missed it, part 1 was about just fabric organization and some cutting tips and ways to organize the sparrows. I'm doing the scrappy version, as you can see behind me, which is made with 8 fat quarters and some solid prints for the tail feathers and beaks and the arrows in it. I also swapped in a few more fat quarters for even more variety, which I'll show you when I talk about piecing the birds. But today I'm focusing on piecing tips. There's a few different spots that can be a little tricky to line up and just get a continuous line where the pieces connect, and so I want to focus on those. My first tip would be to focus on all of the left-facing birds first, and then do the right-facing birds, or vice versa. But I think just making one direction at a time, at least for me, helps me keep things straight and not mix up pieces. I'll show you kind of a blurred picture here of what I've been doing with the pattern. I've highlighted the left-facing units in one color, the right-facing in another, and so after I've read through it, and pieced it the first time, all I really need to do now is look at the pictures. And so I did left-facing first, so I just focused on all my orange highlights and didn't even highlight the other side. And then when it was time to do the right, I crossed out the orange units and brightly circled in the red color there all the right-facing units. And so that helped me really to pay attention to where all my pieces should be pointing. If you don't have the digital pattern and you have the hard copy that you don't want to mark up like that, you can always use little sticky notes and cover the sides you're not focusing on, again, just so they don't get mixed up. So that would be my first tip, just to keep these 24 birds straight in your mind, is to focus on one direction at a time. But let's take a look now at some piecing tips. With the K and I pieces, we're going to make half square triangles, and the pattern does an 8 at a time method, which I'll show you how to do here. You start by drawing a diagonal line corner to corner on your lighter pieces, or an X is another way of looking at it. And I use a pencil. You can use any marking tool you'd like, because the lines won't show later. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from those drawn lines. And these are oversized, so you don't have to worry about squeezing in close to that pencil line. You can take the full 1/4 inch. So chain piecing is really helpful here. You can, after you've done one side, turn it around and then sew 1/4 inch away on the other side. And then you'll flip and do the other diagonal line. So you should sew 4 lines total on these pieces. When it's time to trim, I would suggest a rotating cutting mat if you have it, or a small cutting mat that you can lift and turn. The less you move these pieces around, the better. So you're going to start by just cutting on the pencil lines that you drew, and that will give you 4 half square triangles. To get the 8 half square triangles, you're going to cut through the center of each of the 4. So I like to use the lines of my ruler to make sure nothing is crooked. They're all just aligned and touching a line, and then you're going to cut through the center points of the triangles like this. And then you're going to rotate one more time and do the same thing. Line up the edges of your fabric along the lines of the ruler. Make sure everything's straight and cut through those center points again. And that will yield 8
of these half square triangles, and there are a lot of them in this pattern, so this is a great method to do several at a time. Now it's time to press them open, and you want to be careful that you don't distort your line, so just kind of smush it open. I like to press it dry and then some steam. I use my water mister and then just give it a good press. Then I use these wooden candle jar holders, like the tailor's clappers. I don't have those, but these work nicely as well, just to get them extra flat. So you have a bunch of these to do. Again, just be real careful that you don't make that line go crooked. And then it's time to trim the pieces down.
All my half square triangles have been trimmed down to size, and I'll link a video that I did a while ago showing how I square these up. You can see that there was plenty of half square triangle to trim down, so you don't have to worry about scant 1/4 inch seams or anything when you're sewing the two larger squares together. They're definitely oversized, and so you can trim them down and not have to worry about cutting it too close. So now I'm going to start assembling the sparrow, and I will share some tips that I find helpful as I go through the process. Before I start sewing the sparrows, I decided that I would lay them out on the design wall in the rows of 4, and so I'll show you what I was thinking when I did this. I was trying to make sure that the bottom of the birds didn't match the heads of the birds, which would be next. So I kept everything clipped together and then just pinned them. So everywhere I was looking, that the base of the bird wouldn't be the same fabric as the head, and also that the bases and heads weren't going to be identical side by side. So pinning it on a board like this really helps to get a feel for the color layout, and that dark blue really pops out, so I wanted to make sure it was evenly distributed as well. So the top row, followed by all the odd rows, are going to be the sparrows pointing left, and then the even rows are pointing right. So I'm going to sew all the left facing birds first, just so I don't mix any of the pieces up. I'm going to do all left, then I'll do all the right birds. And you may have noticed I did swap out a couple of the bird bodies with the bigger print. I just really wanted to tie it in, and when I saw the size of these pieces, I thought it would be big enough to really highlight those. So I did decide to substitute a few pieces with other fat 1/4 pieces that I had in the bundle. And I took a picture on my phone to help me remember my color layout should I put something back in the wrong place or forget when I take these down. So always take a picture of your layout just in case. These are all the units you can make ahead of time if you want to just chain piece them and have them ready for all the scrappy birds you're going to make. This is the beak unit from step 6 and 7 in the pattern, and in the diagrams it's called figure F. These ones are from step 17 or figure O, and again I just did the ones that go for the left hand side. Later I'll do the right. I didn't want to get anything mixed up. And these ones come from step 25 and 27. You can do the same for 26 and 28 for the right facing units, but this is figure V here. So those 3 can be made without any of your scrappy fabrics that are going to make up the bird's bodies. So just something you might do ahead of time so you can just have them ready to go when you're ready to make your sparrow units. Now is also a good time to check your points if any of them got cut short or there's a lot of background fabric showing, to redo them before they're sewn in to the rest of the sparrow block. Additionally, if your tail feather fabrics are all going to be the same, you can assemble the Y units or Z units if they're going to be the right facing birds. And so if you assemble those ahead of time, you can also connect them to the figure V or W units because these will all be the same fabrics for your birds. So that's another thing you can chain piece and just do ahead of time so that when you're ready to assemble
your scrappy birds, these pieces will all be ready to go. Looking at a finished block, there are 3 seams that are important to pay close attention to get things to line up. The first is right here where the head connects to the top of the beak. And then connecting these 2 pieces here, the top and bottom unit, trying to get that straight diagonal line. And then this vertical seam right here, it makes your arrows have their sharp points that all meet right here, and then the tail feather attaching to the back of the bird. So those 3 seams are the trickiest, and I'll show you my tips for getting those points to align. To get the top of the beak to align with this point on the front of the bird's face, you're going to want to make sure that this top horizontal line of the beak is 1/4 of an inch away from this point where you're going to want the beak to actually start once it's all sewn together. So if they're pieced correctly, it should just naturally happen if the sizing is all right, but just think 1/4 inch away. So if we turn these over, and get that stitch line 1/4 inch away from where the 2 colors meet on the edge there. There it is with the seam pressed open. Again, your goal is to get that beak point to match up with the point of the front of the head. When you're ready to sew the middle unit together and you want the top diagonal to align to the bottom, something that has helped me is if you flip the top piece over here and you follow the pattern directions, it says to press the seams open. And so I use this diagonal, the yellow here, to align or lie right on top of this diagonal to the bottom piece. So if your seams are all correct and your cutting is accurate, they should just naturally lie one on top of the other, but if you need to adjust or something, you can. So let me see if I can show it from this angle here. I just want those diagonals to lie right on top. And then I'll just pin close by to hold it in place. Maybe one more over here, just, to hold my layers together well so there's no slipping. But that has helped me to get that straight line connecting the diagonals. You can see once I've pressed the seams, it makes a nice straight line connecting the 2 pieces. So to match up these points and then also the tail feather to continue this diagonal line, first thing I'm going to do is connect and nest the diagonal line of the body with the diagonal line of the tail feather. So I'm just going to put them together till they lock into place there, and put a pin there, and then just pin the rest of it. And maybe one in between to hold them in place. Okay, so again, this diagonal is locked in with this diagonal. And then there's a seam here, and this first seam doesn't nest with anything. It almost seems like it should in that made me nervous at first, but it's really right under the first triangle that you also want to nest with your 2 triangles here. But you also want to line up the points. So something that I do is first just try and eyeball it so that the tips are lined up, and then lock it into nest. And I'm going to put this pin a little lower just so it's out of the way for a moment, but still holding them locked together. And then you can take another pin and right at that intersection point of the 2 threads at the top, stick the pin through the first layer, and then at the top of the bottom triangle, stick the pin through. And so that way you have your 2 tops lined up. And then if you need to adjust, and these feel pretty good, but I'm gonna just take that first pin out and lock them into place now. And so when I sew my 1/4 inch, it should hit right at that intersection point, but that's the line I'm aiming for, and it should give me a 1/4 inch right where I need it on both sides. So I'm gonna just line up my corners here and give that a try, see how close I can get it. Okay, I'm just gonna go slow as I get near my pins. I'll take out the one that's at the top, go just a little closer. And again, I'm aiming for the intersection point. We got. Swing this around. Right, and this will look better when it's pressed open. So we can see this line is straight, so the nesting worked well. And then, yeah, the point looks pretty sharp there. Maybe just the very tip got cut off, not enough for me to feel like I need to go back and redo it, because when I press it flat, it's gonna look pretty sharp. And then down here we have this diagonal line continuing down here, so that's what we want to see. Here it is with the seams pressed, so that got the corner just to the right sharpness there, and again a nice continuation of the line. So definitely looks better when it's pressed open. I've got the first row of sparrows complete, and at this point I could sash them together just so there's not as much to do at the end, but I think I'm going to leave them in case I want to swap any around after I see them put together. So underneath them I've got the second row, just placeholders there where the right facing sparrows are going to go. So now I'm going to keep making the left facing sparrows, and I'm going to go ahead and do the third row now, and I'll just keep going till I have them all made.
As you can see on the design wall behind me, I've been keeping my sparrows in order and oriented in the right direction, and you can also see the ones that I haven't finished yet. I have these gathered bundles of fabric to show me where they go in the quilt, so under or above, whichever sparrow. So they're all in their respective places as well, so that I can just make a sparrow and pin it up on my board and see how it's going. So that way when I'm done, I'll get an overall picture of what the quilt looks like, and I can swap any around that I may need to that maybe didn't turn out the way I thought they would next to other color combinations when they're all finished. So again, if you have a design wall or just a place to lay out your blocks and take a picture, even if you have to pick them all up after, I would suggest that as a way to just keep track of where you want them to go if it's important to you, their placement. Or you might just decide completely random and where they end up is where they end up and swap them around at the end. That works too. So whatever your preference is. Having done the units that are the same in every bird, like the beak and the whole end unit with the tail feather and the partial arrows, that has made making the birds so much quicker. If I get all my seams right and don't have any seam ripping to do, I can usually finish a sparrow in just under 30 minutes. So I can get a couple done a day, you know, after work or on weekends, maybe a little more. And so it's been a pretty quick process having pieced those consistent units together. So this is the final video I'll do for the Sparrows unit. I'm not going to do a part 3, but I will keep sharing the progress as I make progress videos of the other projects that I'm working on. I'll make sure to include where I'm at and any new blocks, make sure to show those in those videos. But I just wanted to help those of you who are also making the Sparrows quilt with some tips that might make it go a little smoother or more efficiently for you. I was really intrigued by what a viewer said in the comment section when she was voting for the Sparrows quilt. Again, at the beginning of January, she had mentioned the Sparrows quilt would be good for this time of year, and I was thinking, well, New Year's, and it got me wondering, what does New Year's have to do with sparrows? Why might that be a good thing? And so I just was Googling what do sparrows symbolize, and depending on what site you look at, they can symbolize all kinds of things, but the ones that really stuck out to me was creativity, productivity, peace, freedom, love, and I liked the idea too that it said they're birds that are very adaptable and seem very happy without much and can live off of scraps. And I thought, you know, scraps and quilting are kind of go together. You can make beautiful things out of scraps, and I like that sentiment that sparrows use what they have to have a happy life, and I like to think that that's what we do with our quilts too. We use what we have to make beautiful quilts and make other people happy and beautify our homes with them. So I liked that sentiment a lot. And of course, it also said that they symbolize good fortune and good luck, so I could see that being a nice sentiment for the new year. So whatever they mean to you, or maybe you just think they're adorable little birds, this is a fun quilt to make, and it does have a lot of meaning. And so whether it's for you or a recipient, I hope you enjoy making it. I'm having a lot of fun making it, and again, I hope this is helpful to you. And even if you're not making it, I hope that you've enjoyed seeing these sparrows come together and seeing my progress on it. So until next time, I'll see you later. Thank you again for liking and subscribing. Take care.